There is something that Jewish families have been doing quietly for thousands of years. Something so simple, so specific that most people walk right past it and never notice. And it has nothing to do with being born into money. It has nothing to do with connections or luck or living in the right city. It has everything to do with 5 things they refuse to do. 5 things they will not touch. Not because they are afraid, but because they know something about money that most people were never taught. And by the time I finish telling you what those 5 things are, you will never look at your finances the same way again. I want you to think for a moment about someone you know. Maybe it is you. Maybe it is someone in your family or a friend you have watched for years. This person works hard. I mean truly hard. They wake up early. They stay up late. They sacrifice weekends. They sacrifice time with the people they love. And yet, no matter how much they work, the money never seems to stay. It comes in and it goes out. The bills are always there. The worry is always there. There is this constant feeling like running on a treadmill at full speed and looking up and realizing you have not moved even 1 inch. Maybe you have experienced this yourself. That moment when you sit down at the kitchen table, you open your bank account on your phone, and your stomach drops. Not because you did anything wrong, not because you were irresponsible, but because somehow despite everything you have done, it is still not enough. I have seen this happen to so many good people, people with real talent, real ambition, real faith. And I used to wonder why. Why does it seem like some families move forward generation after generation, building and growing and passing something real on to their children, while others stay stuck in the same place, no matter how hard they tried it? I grew up watching my grandmother handle money in a way that always struck me as different. She was not rich by any conventional standard. She came from very little, but there was a quality off piece around her relationship with money that I never saw in other homes. She never panicked. She never chased. And she always had enough, more than enough. And one day when I was old enough to really listen, she sat me down and said, "The way you treat money tells money how to treat you." That sentence stayed with me for decades. And the more I studied, the more I went back to our texts, to Torah, to Talmud, to the wisdom that has been passed through our families like a quiet fire that never goes out, the more I understood exactly what she meant. What I am going to share with you today are 5 specific things that Jewish families in our tradition and in our practice have refused to do with money for thousands of years. These are not theories. These are not inspirational ideas. These are actual behaviors rooted in real teaching that create a completely different relationship with wealth. And that relationship is exactly what makes the difference. Let me start with the first one. And this one may surprise you, because it isn't what people usually talk about. Jewish families never speak badly about money. Not in front of children, not at dinner table, not in passing, not in the way most people do, without even realizing it. Things like "we can never afford that." Money is the root of all problems. Rich people are greedy. These phrases feel harmless. They feel like venting. But in our tradition, we take very seriously what comes out of our mouths. There is a story I want to tell you. My great-aunt Rivka, she came to this country with almost nothing. Her husband had passed away young, and she was left alone with 3 children and very little money. She took in sewing work. She cleaned houses. She did whatever she had to do. But there was one thing she was very strict about. She never allowed anyone in her home to speak negatively about money. Not to say we are poor. Not to say money is the problem. If her children ever said something like that, she would stop whatever she was doing and correct them immediately. She would say, "Do not curse what you are trying to build." Her children thought she was superstitious, until they grew up and saw what their mother had built from nothing, until they understood that she was not superstitious at all. She was anchored in something very old and very true. In the Talmud, in the tractate of Bava Metzia, there is a teaching that speaks about the power of speech. Our rabbis understood that words are not just expressions. Words are creative forces. The Zohar, the foundational text of Kabbalah, teaches that the tongue has the power to open gates or to close them. And when we speak about money with contempt, with fear, with bitterness, we're closing a gate that needs to stay open. What we call in Hebrew lash in the dung is not a small thing. It is the mechanism through which we shape our reality. And this applies directly to wealth. So here is what I want you to do starting today. I want you to pay attention to how you speak about money. Not in a performance way, not in a fake way, but with real awareness. When you catch yourself saying something contemptuous about wealth or about your finances, stop. Replace it. You do not have to pretend everything is perfect, but you can speak about money the way you would speak about a relationship. You want to grow with respect, with intention, with expectation of good things. Because in our tradition, we believe that money, what we call parnasa, which means sustenance, livelihood, the flow of provision in your life, responds to how you treat it. Not magically, but practically and spiritually in ways that our grandmothers understood, and that many people today have completely forgotten. But this is only the beginning. The second thing I need to tell you is even more important, and it is something that most people do the exact opposite of. Jewish families never confuse spending with celebrating, and this distinction is everything. There is a story in the Torah that I think about often. When the Israelites were wandering in the desert, God provided manna for them every single day, bread from heaven, miraculous, consistent daily provision. But there was a rule.
You could only take what you needed for that day.
If you tried to take more than your portion, it would drop by morning. Except on Friday, where you could take double because Saturday was Shabbat, the day of rest and renewal. That story is not just history, it is a teaching about the nature of provision and the nature of trust. Take what you need. Honor the rhythm of rest and abundance. Do not hoard out of fear, and do not spend recklessly because it feels good in the moment. I have watched so many people I know fall into this trap. Not because they are bad with money, but because in our culture today, spending has become the primary way we celebrate. We buy something new when we're happy. We buy something expensive when we want to feel successful. We upgrade. We splurge. We treat ourselves. And none of those things are wrong in themselves. But they become dangerous when they replace what my grandmother called avoa, which means purposeful work and intentional action. En Pirsavad, the ethics of the fathers, there's a saying, who is rich? He who is happy with what he has. Now, I know that sounds simple. It sounds almost too simple. But I want you to hear it differently than you may have heard it before. It is not telling you to settle. It is telling you that the feeling of enough is not something money creates. It is something you decide. And when you decide it, you stop bleeding money in ways that leave you wondering where it all went. Here is what Jewish families actually do. They celebrate with experience, with togetherness, with food prepared at home, with ritual. Shabbat dinner is one of the most beautiful examples of this. Every Friday evening there is candles, there is wine, there is challah, there is family. It is an abundant experience, but it isn't expensive. The abundance is not in what you spend. The abundance is in what you create. And that shift from spending as celebrating to creating as celebrating changes everything about how money accumulates in a family. So, I want you to think about the last 5 times you made a significant purchase. Not bills, not necessities. I mean the times you bought something to feel something. Ask yourself honestly, was that money in service of your values? Or was it just filling a moment? This is not about guilt. This is about awareness. Because awareness is where all real change begins. Now, pay close attention to what I am about to say. Because this third thing, this is the one that I believe changes everything. This is the one that most people never hear, and the one that our families have protected and practiced for thousands of years. Jewish families never separate charity from wealth building. They treat them as the same act. I need to tell you about a man named Joseph. Not a man from history, but a man from a community, a man I knew personally. He had come here with nothing. Truly nothing. He spoke almost no English. He had no connections. He had a family to feed and no idea how he was going to do it. He found work in a textile warehouse, physical work, long hours, very little pay. And from his very first paycheck, before he paid anything else, before he bought groceries, before he paid the landlord, he gave 10% away. His wife thought he had lost his mind. But Joseph had been raised with a teaching that was in his blood. In the book of Malachi, God says something extraordinary. He says, "Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse. Test me in this, and I will open the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing so great you will not have room enough for it." In Hebrew, this practice of giving is called tzedakah, and the word tzedakah does not just mean charity. It means justice, righteousness. It means giving back to the flow what belongs to the flow. Joseph gave 10% of everything, for years, even when it was hard, even when it made no logical sense, and within 5 years, that man had his own business. Within 10 years, that business had 3 locations. His children grew up with opportunities he could not have imagined when he first arrived. He said to say, "I did not become wealthy and then start giving. I started giving and wealth followed the opening I created." The Talmud in Tractate Tanit records asing, make your Shabbat like a weekday rather than be dependent on others. In other words, live within your means, protect your dignity, but give anyway. Give first. Because giving is not what you do after you have built your wealth. Giving is how you build it. And I want to be very specific here, because this is the part that matters. I am not telling you to give money you do not have. I am telling you to take whatever comes in hand before anything else, before one bill, before one expense. Give something. 10% is the traditional measure. If that feels impossible, start with 1%. Start with something, because the act of giving first signals to yourself and to the deeper laws of the universe that God set in motion, that you trust the flow, that you are not operating from scarcity, that you are a channel, not a vault. A vault holds and hoards and fears. A channel receives and moves and grows. And channels do not run dry. Now, here is what most people miss about this practice. It is not just spiritual. It is psychological. When you give first, you break the grip off fear over your finances. Fear is the thing that makes people hold too tight, invest too conservatively, miss opportunities because they are too afraid to move. Giving first, even a small amount, is an act of courage. That rewires how you relate to money. Our families have known this for thousands of years, and it is one of the most powerful financial habits I have ever witnessed in real life. There are 2 more things, and I want to make sure you hear them clearly, because together they form something complete. The 4th thing that Jewish families never do with money is this. They never make major financial decisions without counsel, without deliberate collective wisdom. This is deeply embedded in how we think and how we have always thought. The Talmud is itself a record of deliberation. Generations of sages sitting together, questioning, debating, refining. Not because any one rabbi was wrong, but because the tradition holds that wisdom is sharpened by other wisdom. There is a verse in Proverbs 15 verse 22.